us in ECOWAS, the ECOWAS agricultural policy, in which food resilience, food system transformation are already embedded in the framework and orientation given by our authorities. Therefore, we are expecting that the post-summit agenda will build and align with these high-level orientation. I wish you fruitful deliberation, debate, and I will hand over to my friend and brother, Dr. Usman Madian, to be the moderator of this meeting. Of course, I would have loved to do it, but I am in a context where the connectivity, the light system is very complicated. That is why I give my cap of chairperson and moderator of all this session to Usman Badian, where I think his connection is more stable. So thank you again for giving me that opportunity to deliver the opening remarks. And thanks for all for joining us for these very, very important again sessions. And I'm going over to Usman Badian. Thank you very much. Usman.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Alain. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. We also appreciate you always being available. Whenever we need you, you're there to represent the region. It's for us an honor and a pleasure, and especially now today also hosting and welcoming your colleagues from ECAS and from UMA. So thank you for helping us build that bridge. And also thank you for clarifying what we expect from the summit as Africa, as UMA, as ECOWAS, and as ECAS. I think that's important. We as experts and others need to keep that in mind as well, because our role is to provide the guidance that you need as our political leaders to deliver on the agenda for all of our people. It's in that sense that I'm going to be reminding our participants, whom I all welcome here. I don't want to start citing names because I'm certainly going to make a mistake if I do. But I will join Director Alain Traoré to welcome the panelists, all of them, but also, and more importantly, our keynote speaker, Dr. Yemi Akambajo from FARA. So we are honored to have him here to join us and to deliver the keynote. I was going to say that the objectives here are the following: to deliberate on the challenges and opportunities to transforming African food systems in Africa, to exchange and showcase the best practices, lessons learned, and technological innovations from our backgrounds, all of us here from the different expertise areas that we're coming from, and to build on that to try and identify game-changing solutions that will help contribute to the broader debate, but also to fit into the summit itself. And we would like to discuss the role of high-level African champions that will carry the voice of Africa and how they can be empowered and supported and enabled to give us a very strong, clear, and vigorous voice around this summit and the follow-up. So what we expect, therefore, as outcomes here today is increased understanding of the critical issues and challenges, all of us from our different perspectives, a consensus on potential game-changing solutions, again reflecting what we know to be working on the ground, identifying possible high-level champions in this engagement with the rest of the globe and within Africa to be able to have a voice, have clarity of vision, and communicate and articulate that in line with those three concerns that we heard from Director Traoré. And hopefully then at the end, we can have a consolidated statement that will reflect the outcome of our discussion here today. So thank you again to all of you for joining us. So we will, after the welcoming address from the Director Alain Traoré, we were expecting to have opening remarks from Professor Joachim von Braun, who couldn't in last minute not make it with us yesterday night, actually, something came up. But we are lucky and fortunate that we have a video message from Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the chair of the Global Food Systems Summit, who is spearheading not just the summit, but also helping create these platforms and the dialogues for everybody's voice to be heard. I'm going to call on my team to play that video for us quickly. before we then move to the keynote address by Dr. Yemi Akamebajo. So Julie or Tsitsi, if you have the video, please go ahead, if it's ready.
Your Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, as you know, last year the UN Secretary General called for a food system summit to unleash the power of food to drive progress across all 17 United Nations development goals. I thank you for stepping forward to become a leader for the food system's change. These dialogues bring together people from all parts of society to share evidence, experience, and new ideas. Food is powerful. The food we eat brings us together as families, as communities, and as nations. It underpins our culture, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world. The world's food system touches every aspect of human existence, which makes them valuable instruments of change. The reason we are having a summit this year, and the reason we are here today, is because we are goals for the 2030 agenda. Our food systems have staggering levels of inequality. Our key priority for this summit is to bring more inclusive, equitable, and healthier food systems while also safeguarding our planet. These dialogues are a core element of the summit process. They are come together and identify priorities and actions to be taken for a better future. This will be a people's summit, but it will also be a solution summit because everyone is part of the food system. We are looking to get all of you and your ideas around the table. Different actors. We want action to be driven by you. Your leadership and the ability to have courageous conversations rather than avoid them will be very critical. If we can't have courageous conversations about what needs to change and how we need to work together, then we won't be able to go very far. We need each of you to determine the food system. The reality. We must do this understanding fully well our place in the world and that what we do as individuals impacts on others. In this summit process, together we can build a world of inclusive growth, environmental sustainability, and social justice. We can build no one is poor and no one is left behind. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sheikh. Thank you to our communications team. It is now my pleasure and my honor to introduce my brother and friend, Oga Igwe, everything, Yemi Akamebajo, Executive Secretary of FARA, which is at the forefront of the fight for technology for the African continent. Thank you for taking your time from your very, very busy schedule to join us today for the key note of this event today. So the floor is yours, Yemi. Thank you very much again from all of us. You are muted, I think. There you go.
Thank you very much, my dear brother Usman. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who has found it good to be able to join us on this very, very wonderful platform this afternoon. It's a great honor for me to have been called upon to say a few words on something that I'm also quite passionate about. And I will be discussing around the theme of today's subject, which is building resilience and sustainable food systems in Africa, mobilizing African voices and building momentum for the UN Food Systems Summit. So I want to first of all congratulate Academia 2063 for coming up with this noble initiative for West, Central, and North Africa. And I think it is really a great thing that somehow you're managing to galvanize the thoughts across the continent and to be able to have an integrated voice at the forthcoming Food System Summit. So you have my compliments and congratulations. So let me continue now, standing on existing protocols, to now express myself a little bit further on the subject of this meeting. So for those who are not so familiar with the organization that I work for, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, let me seize the opportunity to say a few words about what we do in FARA. FARA came into existence since 1997, and it was created by the decisions of the sub-regional organizations and also ratified in the 17th plenary of the Special Program for African Agricultural Research, which used to be called the SPA. And it is today our apex organization that is responsible for coordinating agricultural research on the continent and also advising the African Union Commission on issues related to agricultural science, technology, and innovation, and also serves as the entry point for agricultural research initiatives that is designed to have a continental reach or a subcontinental reach spanning more than one sub-region. So my institution, FARA, plays a key role in galvanizing the agricultural research for development sector. And this brings a very strong African voice to global forums as the G8, the Global Forum for Agricultural Research, and the likes. So having said that, on FARA, I see the subject of building resilient and sustainable food systems in Africa extremely intriguing. It is also very, very important for the continent at a time such as this. So the food systems are crucial for addressing the problems of food insecurity, malnutrition, and diet-related health problems that is now becoming another form of pandemic. But to put it in numerical perspective, we live in a world where 2 billion people, men, women, children, are suffering from food insecurity, and a world in which the progress, we are not progressing as we should towards SDG targets 2.1 or SDG target 2.2. We also have issues with resilience and sustainable food systems, which makes the topic even worth discussing. Now, this is a particularly relevant in this time, as I said before, when the world's population is growing at a faster rate than expected, and the availability of the new arable land is also shrinking, and ensuring food and nutrition security has become one of the greatest development challenges of our time. It is important, ladies and gentlemen, to note that the lack of food security and malnutrition takes on special significance in sub-Saharan Africa, where we have about 675 million people of the 2 billion that I mentioned earlier on, of the world's food insecure live, and more than 250 million of the population are undernourished. And it is also worth noting that when SDG number 2 fails, all the other goals are also bound to fall. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, this puts in proper perspective the reason or the rationale or raison d'etre for why this subject becomes very, very crucial. When you look at what we call the BR, the Biennial Review of 2019, it shows that Africa's food system is significantly off track. while we have 36 out of the 49 reporting African Union member states improving their overall agricultural transformation scores compared to 2017, only 4 countries surpassed the 2019 benchmark. So this is a serious cause for concern. Similar trends are seen throughout the biennial report, and few countries on track to meet specific targets. In order to create the conditions that are necessary and sufficient for ensuring resilience towards lasting food and nutrition security on the continent, our efforts must be sustainable in economic sense, in environmental sense, political sense, and social sense. So sustainable development of our food system esteems and upholds local conditions to ensure that the land's natural resources is not depleted, not diminished, to ensure the continuity of change after the exit of development projects and programs. Ladies and gentlemen, the food system of the African continent cannot be improved to a level which can be described as resilient and sustainable if current bottlenecks or challenges are not eliminated. Let me repeat that. The food system for Africa cannot be improved to a level which can be described as resilient or sustainable if the current bottlenecks or challenges are not eliminated. It is abysmally low in the requisite human and financial resources required to make significant shifts in the digital and biotechnology divides. Without these shifts, ladies and gentlemen, the talk of an African food system will remain a fiasco. It will remain a mirage. So the vulnerable African food system will continue to face several challenges, including extreme weather events and climate change, limited levels of yield increasing technologies, dependency on rain-fed agriculture, and low levels of irrigation, and most recently, the all too known COVID-19 pandemic. And this ought to be decisively addressed. Now, notwithstanding these challenges, opportunities abound for Africa to increase its resilience and enhance the sustainability of its food system. Africa continues to be the host of 60% of the world's arable land. This is a statistic that we're too familiar with. And throughout Africa, there exists over 200 million hectares of uncultivated land. And that can be brought to productive use in climate-smart ways through the application of the power of science. Even degraded lands in other parts of the world, like the Cerrados in Brazil, they were reversed and put into very significant economic use. On average, it has been shown that growth in agriculture is 2 or 3 times more effective in reducing poverty than the same amount of GDP growth. Recent estimates, however, show that Africa's food and beverage markets are expected to top $1 trillion in value by 2030, compared to 313 billion achieved in 2010. That's about 3-fold increase in a space of 1 decade. So African agriculture is also energized by entrepreneurial youth and an engaged private sector that is taking note of its potential. Young Africans are making agriculture a viable business, creating opportunities for farmers and for themselves. If Africa is to build a resilient food system and lift agricultural workers out of poverty, it is essential, ladies and gentlemen, that this potential is unlocked and remain unlocked. There is the urgent need to mobilize all human, natural, economic, and social resources and capital that is available on the continent for this worthy cause. Moving forward, in order for us to unlock this said potential through the mobilization of these resources, there needs to be a game-changing approach by all African governments and the development partners. Let me now take this opportunity to propose some game-changing actions that I believe are necessary for promoting sustainable and resilient food systems on the African continent. Number one, Africa must build on and enhance the traditional production systems, reviving interest in traditional food crops, what is also known now in new parlance of forgotten foods, and developing integrated approaches to pests and production management, and to land and water management as well. This will not only reduce the vulnerability that can go with intensive agricultural systems, but is also important for public health and nutrition. Furthermore, cultivating traditional crops will help to preserve plant genetic resources as well as our cultural heritage. Smallholders, who form the majority of farmers who give food on the table on this continent, need a lot of support to enable them to compete in domestic, regional, and international markets. Everybody is looking for improved livelihoods. Perhaps providing them with financial assistance and training to improve their negotiation skills will remain vital. Training can also help small businesses meet the sanitary and phytosanitary standards required by supermarkets and international markets for their increasingly demanding customers. African countries must therefore strive to meet the target of investing at least 10% of the GDP in the agricultural sector. This has been on the table since 2003. The current average of 3.3% needs to be improved. That means we need to scale up threefold if the food system on the continent is to become sustainable and resilient. In other words, we need to up the game in terms of investments and financial resources to be able to reverse these very unpleasant statistics. This is the very important lever in the process. For example, imagine the food import bill of about $50 billion on an annual basis on the continent in a system that is producing and churning out tens of thousands of graduates in agriculture and agriculture-related fields, having abundant arable lands, as I mentioned before, 60% of global arable lands, 80% of the fresh water, and 65% of youth population, and still we remain a net importer of foods. Something is not adding up, and we need to tweak the narrative. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, governments on the continent must continue to create and implement policies that will support a food system and make it thrive. In addition, favorable policy environments that allows small and medium-sized enterprises and agro-industries to develop and flourish needs to be created. This is the essence of the food system. It takes the whole gamut into consideration. Such policies are needed across a wide range of domains, including agricultural research and extension, market information systems, and development and maintenance of rural roads and so on. Policies must also eliminate agricultural trade and macroeconomic regulations that reduce farmers' incomes. On a personal note, ladies and gentlemen, as a researcher and the executive director of a research institution involved in Africa's research for development, I cannot end my proposition without discussing agricultural research. While population continues to increase, there has been a deceleration in investment in food systems, research and development, and currently, an average of less than 1% of African government's GDP is spent on agricultural research. This is far below the global average. Investment in research, including foresighting future scenarios and development of new agricultural technologies, as well as for climate change adaptation and mitigation, should be a priority for all governments. Investments in research has shown to produce good returns, and a recent report by the CGIAR indicates that every dollar spent on agricultural research produces almost $9 worth of added food in developing countries. Agricultural research can ensure that the smallholder and the fisher folks have the means to adapt to climate change. It can further ensure that poor rural people whose lives and livelihoods depend on the earth's productive capacity have the means to produce more and produce it better. Mobilizing African voices should remind us of the need to form and strengthen partnerships among African stakeholders in the food system. Improving a food system necessarily calls for a system approach, which in turn entails devising an institutional mechanism for the relevant actors to work systematically and seamlessly as partners. The establishment of innovation platforms that bring together stakeholders with a common interest to leverage skills, research technologies, competencies, markets, financing, social capital, and other resources are critical for economies of scale in the deployment of technologies and innovation. Market-driven approaches should be promoted and strengthened, given that they can serve as reinforcement of agroecological production systems and patterns. Technologies for collecting, storing, analyzing, and sharing information digitally have great potential to improve efficiency, equity, and environmental sustainability of the African food system. Digital solutions could become a game changer in boosting agricultural productivity and resilience in a sustainable way in Africa. The technologies enable actors within the food system to make informed decisions, also to improve their productivity and incomes and achieve better nutrition, better health, and resilience outcomes. Furthermore, digital technologies can be applied for agricultural e-commerce, thereby helping to link buyers with sellers, shorten agricultural value chains, provide access to new markets, reduce transaction costs, and create new business opportunities for actors within the food system. The agricultural financing gap, ladies and gentlemen, in many African countries surpass government budgets and available donor funding. I will make a quick, brief reference to the great work that is titled the CERES 2030, CERES as in C-E-R-E-S 2030, that has recently been published and reveals that we have a funding gap of 15 billion US dollars. Now, this challenge is hanging on our necks like an albatross. Unless and until we are able to bridge this funding gap, we can also imagine that we are not yet seeing the end of our woes. So, to maximize finance, it is important to leverage the private sector resources and minimize the burden of public debt. Innovative financing leverages all sources of financing to support agricultural growth and resilience, crowding in private investment to optimize the use of scarce public resources. Sources of private finance for the food system are growing on the continent and includes farmers' own savings, local and international banks, microfinance institutions, value chain actors, impact investors, development finance institutions, private sector foundations, and agricultural investment funds. And because the agricultural sector is prone to considerable production, market, and enabling environmental risks, blended finance can be used to support high impact projects where perceived risk is higher than the actual risk. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I wish to remind ourselves of the need to bring our ideas, resources, and energies together as partners to ensure that our food system becomes resilient and sustainable for our generation and the generation yet unborn. By working together and by supporting sustainable agricultural development, I am convinced that we can not only improve the food security and prosperity of those who are hungry, poor, malnourished, but also we can create new opportunities for the people on the African continent to shape our lives now and in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time.
Excellent, my brother, Dr. Ekem Bamijo. This is really to the point, but also broad and deep, talks about potential, the options that exist, game-changing choices, and the call for collaboration, working together. I think this has been exactly what I expected. So thank you very much for a very rich and quite broad and comprehensive keynote. And also thank you for keeping the time for us. Much appreciated. So friends, ladies and gentlemen, let me then turn to the panel discussion, where we have 4 leaders from the different parts of the continent. First, Ms. Fauzia Shakiri Boulouis, Head of Division, Food Security Department of Arab Maghreb Union. Thank you, Sister Fauzia. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you with us. We
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for me too. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for me too.
All right. Then we have Dr. Suleiman Medrawogo, General Director of AgriMet, which is the Center of Excellence for West Africa in Agriculture and Hydrometeorology. So good to have you with us, Dr. Medrawogo. Thank you. We also have Ms. Khadija Al-Fal, President of West African Women Association. Good to have you, Ms. Fal. We always are honored to have you. And last but not least, Mr. Abakar Mohammed, Head of Agriculture, Rural Development Department, Economic Community of Central African States. Thank you for joining us for this panel today to share with us your experience, your understanding, your knowledge about the issues that we're talking about today. So I will be asking you questions in turn. We have 30 minutes for that with you. So if you would want to keep your answers concise and clear so that we can then have time for the Q&A question with the audience. If that's okay with you, I would like to start with Ms. Fauzia. Sister Fauzia, what are some of the unique challenges that you would see from your perspective that the African food system is facing compared to other regions? What makes us different in terms of challenges we have? And while you're thinking about that, what is the Arab Maghreb Union, UMMA, doing to help address those challenges that are specifically faced in North Africa? So what is special, what is different about Africa in general in terms of what we're facing in the food systems, and how are you trying to deal with those in the northern part of the continent? So thank you very much. So you have 3 to 4 minutes to respond to this, and then I'll move to the next panelist. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. What I can say that in our region, in the Arab Maghreb region, we have some specificities. I mean, we faced climate change first. We have this climate change. We have we faced also the scarcity of water in the region, which impact a lot on food system and agricultural production, if you want. And also we have this difference between countries in terms of agricultural development, in terms of production, in terms of environment. So this is some example of what we are facing in the Arab Maghreb Union. What we do to face that, we try to coordinate between the countries, and also we coordinate through institution organs which group experts, and we try to exchange experience and also good experience, and recently we have held a dialogue on water and non-conventional water, so to use this kind of new approach, new technology. We have also the organization of the sector, because as you know, in North Africa, it's as I said, it's different between countries. And for example, we have some countries who are well developed, like Morocco, for example. Morocco in this field is really developed, and also with the green Morocco Green Plan and the new green generation. So the sector is well organized, and there is a lot of things to learn from Morocco to the others. So we try to spread and to make the other countries profit from the experience of the Morocco. So that's what I can say, and maybe if something else I will come back. Thank you so much.
Excellent, Fauzia. I really would want us to reflect more on the ideas, innovation in the water sector. What is going to be faced by all other regions, not just UMMA. And I guess UMMA taking the lead and trying to innovate there can probably provide us with game-changing solutions. And I think it will be good for us to keep that in mind and continue to exchange with you in that area. So thank you. Then let me, still in that direction, you started talking about climate change. Fauzia, I think this is something that Dr. Ouedraogo will have something to say about, given the work of agreement. So my question to you, Dr. Ouedraogo, climate change is a major risk to food systems transformation, especially in a dry area like the Sahel, where your center is leading in that area. So how is agreement, your center, helping to address the threats posed by climate change and other shocks on food systems in West Africa, shocks that nobody knows better than your region and your institutions? So welcome again, and thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Alors, je voudrais remercier Academia pour nous avoir encore associés justement à ce dialogue régional sur le système alimentaire de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, du Centre et du Nord. qu'il me soit permis de dire 2 mots sur le mandat du Centre régional Agrimet, centre dans lequel, justement, dont j'ai la charge ici. Le Centre régional Agrimet, le mandat du Centre Agrimet, c'est surtout l'alerte précoce. Donc, l'alerte précoce est au cœur du mandat du Centre régional Agrimet. Alors, il s'agit pour nous de collecter, traiter et diffuser l'information sur la sécurité alimentaire, l'accès au marché, la gestion des ressources naturelles, la maîtrise de l'eau, la lutte contre la désertification et les changements climatiques dans le Sahel et en Afrique de l'Ouest. Alors, pour ce faire, Agrimet a mis en place des dispositifs et des outils qu'il déroule chaque année en utilisant les données d'observation de la Terre, c'est-à-dire l'imagerie satellitaire et la télédétection. Il s'agit de la prévision saisonnière pour les pays du Golfe de Guinée, qui se déroule chaque année au mois de mars, et la prévision saisonnière pour les pays du Sahel et de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, qui se déroule en avril. Ensuite, il y a le suivi des ressources en eau pastorale. Et nous faisons ce suivi à l'aide justement de l'imagerie satellitaire. Nous avons la cartographie des zones de culture, le suivi des eaux souterraines à partir de l'imagerie satellitaire, la surveillance des ravageurs des cultures, en particulier des criquets pèlerins en zone occidentale, le suivi décadaire de la campagne agricole qui commence en mai et qui se termine au mois de septembre, et l'évaluation des récoltes dans tous les pays de la zone 6 CEDEAO, avec comme finalité le cadre harmonisé qui prend en compte toutes les données produites pour aboutir à une information à mettre à la disposition des décideurs au niveau de la région. Donc, voilà le dispositif que Agrimet a aujourd'hui pour répondre justement aux besoins de la sous-région en matière d'alerte précoce, donc en matière de suivi de la sécurité alimentaire au niveau de la région. Les changements climatiques étant le facteur inhibiteur le plus important au niveau de la région, notre outil de prévision, ce sont les prévisions climatiques et dont nous mettons les résultats à la disposition de la région pour pouvoir anticiper sur ce que serait la physionomie de la campagne et permettre aux décideurs de prendre les dispositions qui s'imposent eu égard justement à la situation de la campagne agricole. Voilà ce que nous avons comme dispositif et outils au niveau du Centre régional Agrimet pour faire face justement à ces problèmes de changement climatique en relation avec la sécurité alimentaire. Je vous repasse la parole, Ousmane.
Excellent. Merci, Dr. Drago. Suleiman, c'est super. I think there is one area where the whole world has something to learn from SEALs and Agrimet. It is in early warning. We all remember the very tough years of the 1970s. And since we have had the cadre harmonisé and the early warning system that is being supported by Agrimet, SEALs member states in West Africa now in general are in a much better position to deal with shocks and the different threats to livelihoods. They trace them, they track them, they document them, they analyze them, and they allow very proactive and response mechanisms that help avoid what we have seen in the 70s. So I think this has been for West Africa, Dr. Drago, a game-changing idea and a solution. And I think this is something that the rest of the world should, I think, look at very closely. So then let me then also talk about an area where in West Africa in particular, we need to pay attention if you have not. We know that the West African region has been integrated through the work of women. The women traders are the main agent driving the West African economy as one space where goods move and people interact. That's why we are happy and pleased and honored to have my sister, Khadija Alfal, here to join us today. And I get a couple of questions, Madam Tal, for you. Your organization is very active in ensuring that women are empowered in general and in West Africa in particular. So I would like to understand from you and for the audience how important women's empowerment is for the transformation, successful transformation of the food system. Women are everywhere and pioneers in some of these segments of the food system. When I just think about processing, which is an area where women are extremely active. So from your perspective, therefore, as president of AFRAO, the West Africa Women's Association, what are the key drivers from that point of view to ensure that our food systems are resilient, sustainable, and transformed successfully, and the role of women in that? Merci, Madame Fall, and thank you also for taking your time to join us today. You're welcome.
Merci beaucoup, mon frère, de nous avoir associés à cette réflexion non seulement bienvenue, mais très appropriée dans le contexte où on se trouve. Je voudrais dire que notre organisation se félicite de notre collaboration avec Academia. Notre organisation travaille avec la CEDEAO depuis fort longtemps et prend en charge l'essentiel des questions genre relatives à l'agriculture. Et quand on parle d'agriculture, évidemment, professeur, c'est l'agriculture avec grand A, tel que nous l'avons pris de l'Union africaine, de Maputo à toutes nos réflexions sur Malabo, pour avoir une certaine orientation de notre agriculture et du rôle des femmes dans cette agriculture. Dans l'économie en général, vous avez raison, c'est les femmes qui portent les ménages, en tout cas la nourriture des ménages. Donc j'aimerais bien qu'on puisse profiter de cet agenda mondial pour replacer la femme au centre des systèmes alimentaires. Cela n'a pas encore été fait, monsieur le professeur. Quand vous regardez les TDR, même de cette réunion, il y a à faire déjà l'état des lieux qui porte la nourriture, qui porte l'alimentation, qui porte les systèmes alimentaires dans la région, dans le continent. Je pense que ce serait très bien. On serait très enthousiaste connaissant votre expertise en matière de mise en évidence des évidences, je peux me permettre l'abus de langage, qu'on puisse déjà en Afrique faire la différence par rapport aux autres continents sur, comme vous le dites si bien d'ailleurs, la place des femmes dans l'alimentation des populations africaines. Si on avait commencé par ça en introduction, en tout cas, ou en slice vraiment bien clair, on aurait pu comprendre peut-être mon analyse à venir, à savoir comment, où est-ce qu'on en est à l'autonomisation des femmes. Parce que l'autonomisation des femmes, ça se construit. Ça peut se construire avec les fondamentaux que je vais vous citer, sur la base des données et de la situation réelle des femmes en Afrique. Elles représentent évidemment plus de la moitié en matière d'acteurs de l'agriculture. Elles sont à l'origine de plus de 80% des nourritures des ménages en Afrique. Elles sont aussi dans la transformation extrêmement bien positionnées. Et nous pensons que tout ceci, malgré le taux d'analphabétisme assez élevé, il y a lieu de considérer cette situation particulière. Des faiblesses que représente l'analphabétisme des femmes et de leur pauvreté, mais en même temps, leur capacité de construire une résilience à partir des atouts dont elles sont l'objet. La Banque mondiale nous a appris à un moment donné, en plus de tout ce que le président de Farah vient de dire sur les impacts de l'agriculture, sans peut-être arriver au niveau des femmes, que si les femmes étaient au même niveau de responsabilisation dans l'agriculture que les hommes, on aurait fait un bond en avant en matière de production agricole de 20%. Tout ceci mis en avant, monsieur le professeur, nous permet de dire qu'il y a lieu de s'arrêter sur la situation des femmes quand il s'agit de parler de système alimentaire. Il y en a plusieurs, nous sommes d'accord, mais chacun des systèmes alimentaires a la femme au début et à la fin. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous voudrons dire que notre organisation, qui travaille avec la CEDEAO sur cette question déjà, et le Sénégal aussi sur cette question pour préparer la rencontre, pense que votre organisation Academia, qui s'est distinguée dans cette matière depuis fort longtemps, pourrait aider à avoir au moins faire un petit état des lieux. Quel est l'état des lieux des systèmes alimentaires? Si on fait l'état des lieux, on peut avancer sur le reste. Et tenir compte de la situation des femmes dans d'autres domaines de l'agriculture qui font qu'à chaque fois, elles sont là en manquant des terres, elles sont là à ne pas accéder au financement, elles sont là à ne pas accéder à l'hydraulique rurale, elles sont là à manquer de beaucoup de choses qui font que si nous devons construire, bâtir une résilience à partir de l'autonomisation des femmes, l'autonomisation est possible parce qu'elles sont aussi à l'origine de plus de 50% des produits du secteur informel. Cela nous fait dire que si on avait fait un peu d'appui, parlant du financement que le président de Ara vient de citer, qu'on appelle de nos voeux depuis Maputo, on appelle de nos voeux ce financement depuis Malabo, on appelle de nos voeux ce financement de l'agriculture à partir de ECOAP, qui a comme priorité le financement de l'agriculture. Et nous sommes là en train d'attendre, de continuer à importer la nourriture, et nous pensons que quand on mange avec la bouche de quelqu'un, il y a de fortes chances qu'on ne soit pas rassasié. Donc, pour ne pas, comme c'est un dialogue, je vais m'attendre à d'autres questions. C'est ce que je voulais dire en introduction, en vous félicitant et en vous remerciant de nous y avoir associés. Merci.
Merci, Madame Fall. Merci, comme d'habitude, thank you for having helped clarify the issues and the nuances, and reminded us also of parameters and statistics and data that clarify the important role that we need to understand better. And thank you for inviting us to work together. We'll be more than happy to join forces on the diagnostics, understanding the role and the scope for and the benefit from greater empowerment and facilitation of the role of women in the transformation of the African food systems. So we are both located in Dakar. Our teams will have the opportunity to get together, and we look forward to a very strong partnership. Let me then turn to our brother Abakar Mohammed from ECAS with a couple of questions. In particular, we heard from North Africa the particular challenges they face, and they think water and innovative solutions they're taking to the water question are very welcome. So we wanted to hear from you as well what you would see are the main challenges from your part of the continent, and how ECAS is helping to address them, focusing on them. We know the food system transformation agenda is rather broad, calling for safe and nutritious food for all, equitable livelihoods, sustainable consumption, production, as well as resilient, inclusive food system. It's really very, very kind of broad. So what unique role do you think regional economic communities like yours can play in ensuring resilience and sustainable food system in a broader context like that, from what's specific to your region to what you think an organization like yours can do in helping advance food systems and their transformation on the continent? Thank you again for joining us. The floor is yours now.
Merci beaucoup, Dr Badian. Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier mon collègue et grand frère Dr Traoré pour m'avoir associé à ce panel, ainsi que Academia et le président du FARA, Yemi Akimbamidjo. Je crois, comme vous le savez, l'Afrique centrale se situe a une position charnière par rapport aux autres communautés économiques régionales reconnues par l'Union africaine comme pilier de l'intégration et regroupe 11 États membres avec des systèmes de production et des systèmes agroalimentaires très diversifiés. Et face à cela, nous avons également 5 zones, à peu près 5 zones agroécologiques qui permettent d'avoir des défis vraiment très, très vastes. Mais pour me limiter vraiment dans le temps, je vais me consacrer à 5 principaux défis majeurs, tout en relevant que dans le discours du professeur Yemi et du message de Madame présidente de Agra, ils ont déjà soulevé les défis technologiques, la dégradation des sols et également la vesticité de certains facteurs de production. En ce qui concerne la région globalement, nous avons le premier défi, c'est celui de la formulation et de la mise en œuvre effective des politiques en matière d'investissement dans le secteur agricole et surtout dans la gestion durable des ressources naturelles. Ça, c'est le premier défi majeur sur lequel il faut rapidement s'attaquer et apporter des solutions concrètes. Le deuxième défi que je peux relever ici, c'est la mise en place d'un environnement économique et financier propice en ce qui concerne la stimulation de la croissance économique des États membres de la sous-région, en mettant en place, par exemple, des outils qui permettent l'accès et la sécurisation, par exemple, du foncier agricole, les systèmes financiers adaptés pour l'agriculture dans la zone et également mettre en place un mécanisme de fiscalité qui est incitatif pour pouvoir développer les systèmes alimentaires durables. Le troisième défi sur lequel la région se concentre actuellement, c'est le développement humain. Donc, on s'est rendu compte que le capital humain est très important pour pouvoir soutenir des systèmes alimentaires durables, notamment par le renforcement des capacités des acteurs. Et ces acteurs, quand je dis acteurs, c'est depuis la recherche jusqu'à le petit exploitant qui est dans son exploitation agricole, l'exploitation familiale. Donc, il faut renforcer la recherche et l'innovation, la formation adaptée également avec des structurations bien définies, des filières agricoles, avec leurs acteurs autour d'un système vraiment qui puisse supporter quand même le changement climatique et les autres chocs auxquels font face le système agricole. Nous avons également le quatrième défi, c'est celui de l'adoption de nouvelles technologies pour le développement de nouveaux types d'agriculture, tout en conservant et en développant également les fonctions du milieu forestier en ce qui concerne le bassin du Congo. Donc, c'est un secret pour personne. Aujourd'hui, le bassin du Congo est le deuxième poumon après l'Amazonie et il est une préoccupation majeure dans le développement des systèmes agricoles dans cette région de mettre un accent sur le bassin, sur le milieu forestier du bassin du Congo, en développant vraiment des technologies respectueuses de l'environnement. Et le dernier, c'est, comme vous le savez, c'est la recrudescence vraiment des crises humanitaires. C'est une zone qui est très fragile, affectée par des crises humanitaires, des crises sociopolitiques, des attaques de terroristes, notamment dans le bassin du lac Tchad avec le Cameroun, la RCA qui est impliquée également, la RDC avec des crises dans la zone, dans l'est de la RDC. Donc, il s'agit vraiment de maîtriser la recrudescence de ces crises humanitaires et faire face également à la recrudescence des ravageurs de culture et des maladies épisodiques, souvent à caractère vraiment zootechnique et transfrontalier, notamment l'exemple de la COVID. En ce qui concerne les solutions sur lesquelles la région se penche actuellement, c'est vraiment la politique agricole, parce qu'il va sans dire qu'on s'est rendu compte que les politiques agricoles jouent un rôle important dans la croissance en faveur des populations rurales. Ces politiques également pourraient soutenir, si elles sont bien planifiées avec un plan stratégique bien mis en œuvre, pourraient soutenir les augmentations de la productivité et de la rentabilité. D'autant plus qu'on s'est rendu compte que quand on a une très bonne politique agricole dans la sous-région, ça permet quand même d'harmoniser rapidement les interventions et d'améliorer en termes de fourniture des intrants et d'échange également des semences et de protection des végétaux pour pouvoir développer vraiment les chaînes de valeur en veillant à ce que tous les segments puissent bénéficier de l'avantage de ces politiques agricoles communes. Et nous avons à travers cette politique agricole commune, développer un certain nombre de programmes, notamment le programme régional d'investissement agricole et de sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle, qui est le PRIASAM, qui s'appuie sur ce que tout à l'heure Madame Madame Kadi l'a dit, sur les engagements de la déclaration de Malabo, et tout en donnant la possibilité également à la sous-région de pouvoir engager la transformation de l'agriculture en mettant un accent sur la proximité des centres urbains avec les zones rurales, en vue de donner une grande chance aux petites exploitations agricoles, parce qu'on a vu avec la crise du Covid que malgré le ralentissement des importations de certains pays, c'était grâce à ces petites exploitations qu'on a pu quand même ravitailler un certain nombre de centres urbains, notamment à Libreville, à travers les produits alimentaires qui venaient du Cameroun, ainsi de suite. Donc voilà ce que je pourrais dire en ce qui concerne les défis et les solutions sur lesquels la CAC est en train de travailler, et je vous remercie.
Excellent, Monsieur Bakar. Mohamed, je pense qu'il y a 2-3 points qui sont saillants ici. Je vais les souligner rapidement pour notre audience. Je vais m'excuser au niveau des traducteurs. Je vais retourner vers l'anglais. So, regional agricultural policy is an area where I think ECOWAS has a lot of experience to share. ECOWAP has been a very systematic undertaking that they have worked on and delivered for years. Will be good perhaps that with your doyen, Dr. Sid Traoré, that you exchange. On the shocks and how to manage them and conflicts, I think there's a rich experience at agreement as well, which touches some of your countries like Chad, but not all. And maybe there may be a way of finding game-changing solutions together. The area that you talked about that I really don't see much happening across the continent, the way it should, is skills development. We do that based on pilots or very few small, tiny schools here or there. We have not yet found an answer to making sure that we can develop and upgrade skills all along the value chains, from the input sectors all the way to trade. Driving a tractor is not like driving a bicycle or a car. The processing sector requires people to operate machinery. Where do you learn that? Being a farmer is a profession. If you just want to do it like your neighbor did and like uncle and auntie did, you're not going to be a performing farmer. But we continue to fail to mainstream vocational and professional training in Africa. This is a real big gap that needs to be addressed. We cannot successfully transform our food systems if we don't have an environment for learning, for skill upgrading and skills development. This should not be a projectized approach. This should be a mainstreamed approach, just like elementary education, just like secondary education or tertiary education. We should have wide coverage at a national level with a very strong network, dedicated budget and dedicated resources, so we can train and modernize our skills as we go in the future. So thank you to all of you. I will now open for question and answers. When you take the floor, please raise your hand so I can see it. And when we give you the floor, please be as concise as you can. Mention your name and your affiliation and ask your questions. You're welcome to direct them to one of the panelists. I will open up now. I'm not seeing the chat box, but Julie, if you could perhaps monitor the chat box for us and read some of the questions in the chat, that would be appreciated. So what I will do now is to open the floor and take a first round of questions. If it's okay with the panelists, I'll take maybe 2 or 3 and then give them the opportunity to respond to those questions. The floor is open now. Please raise your digital hands if you would like to take the floor, or put your questions in the chat box and our team will read them for us. Thank you. While you're getting ready to ask, perhaps Sister Fauzia, if it's okay, I would ask a short question, if you can. I'm very much interested in the innovative ideas that you are looking at UMA in thinking about water and dealing with water scarcity, because I think the potential for game-changing solutions there is quite enormous. Do you have a couple of examples you can share with us? What are the ideas that are emerging from the dialogue that you had around water and water solution in the North? Sister Fauzia from UMA. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you because I was cut. Please, can you repeat?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I was asking that water scarcity is a problem in North Africa. It is going to be a problem everywhere on the continent. So the ideas that are emerging from North Africa that you been talking about around your dialogue in terms of innovative ways of dealing with water scarcity. I just thought that perhaps if you had a minute or two to share with us, what are the ideas coming out of it? They've been preliminary, but from the dialogue, what are people thinking about in dealing with water scarcity? I think all of us would learn from that. I hope the line is good now.
Okay, yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Donc, merci beaucoup. Je vais parler en français. Donc, au niveau de l'humain, comme j'ai dit, au niveau de la région du Maghreb, qui comporte les 5 pays du Maghreb, à savoir le Maroc, l'Algérie, la Tunisie, la Libye et la Mauritanie, 5 pays. Donc, cette région-là, il souffre de la rareté de l'eau et donc, pour faire face à ce problème-là, comme j'ai dit, au niveau institutionnel, nous avons développé un certain nombre d'organes et de groupes de travail d'experts au niveau de la région qui débattent de manière régulière de cette problématique. Et donc, essayer de développer des projets pour l'économie de l'eau, donc notamment, on a travaillé beaucoup sur la reconversion de l'irrigation donc dans les pays et le Maroc, encore une fois, est un pays leader dans ce domaine-là. Donc, vers l'irrigation goutte à goutte. Il y a aussi la réalisation d'un certain nombre de projets avec nos partenaires, notamment la FAO, dans le domaine de l'irrigation, dans le domaine de la réutilisation des eaux non conventionnées. Et dernièrement, on a lancé un dialogue ministériel de haut niveau sur ces aspects-là. Et suite à ce dialogue, il y a eu le lancement d'une initiative maghrébine pour l'utilisation des eaux usées. Et donc, il y a certaines recommandations qui ont été issues de ce dialogue-là, qui concerne la mise en place de plateformes de coordination et notamment une plateforme dédiée à l'utilisation des eaux non conventionnelles, notamment la réutilisation des eaux usées, l'utilisation des eaux salines, etc. Voilà, et merci.
Merci, Ms. Fauzia. This is, I think, a road that we all will have to travel. Those with abundant water and those with scarce water have a lot more that they could do in recycling water, in using water in a much more circular manner. You also shouldn't be used in a linear way, and there's a lot that we could do there, including salt water. And I know that there are very serious efforts in North Africa and the Middle East to promote saline agriculture, really using water that is very, very salty and finding crops that can grow on that. This is important for marginal areas that are dealing with salt all along the coastal regions of Africa. So thank you for that. Do we have any other questions from the audience in the chat box, or raise your hands if you have questions for either Sister Fauzia or Dr. Wedraogo, Madam Tal, or Mr. Abakar Mohammed. You also can ask your questions to Dr. Akima Bijo as well.
Yes, Usman, there are two questions in the chat, and one is actually from Madame Fauzia asking Dr. Wedraogo to tell more about the tools of AgriMet and how they could potentially benefit North Africa. There's also a question from Professor Simba Sibanda of FANARPAN asking, with the high food import bill into the 3 regions participating here today, what measures are policymakers taking to ensure that food imports are nutritious and that we're not importing malnutrition, especially foods that promote obesity and not supply the key nutrients that our populations need?
Excellent. So that one on food, obesity, and nutrition of imports, we'll ask the panelists to choose whoever would like to answer to that one. We got a specific one for Dr. Wedraogo. The tools that you are using to track resources, to anticipate, to support the response mechanisms and the cadre harmonisé. So Sister Fauzia wanted to know if you can comment a little bit more on those tools and then how they could be useful for North Africa. And then we can talk about the nutrition content of imports, open it to the panel. Dr. Wedraogo.
Alors, je voudrais remercier Madame Fauzi Chakiri pour la question qui nous est adressée sur les outils que nous utilisons. Depuis la création du Centre régional AgriMet, il y a une salle télécom qui a été installée et nous recevons par le biais de cette salle télécom, avec les antennes qui sont installées, les informations satellitaires tous les jours et les informations sur le télédétection. Alors donc, ce que nous utilisons comme outil, c'est surtout les données d'observation de la Terre que AgriMet utilise pour essayer de répondre aux préoccupations du moment. Et quand vous voyez le suivi des ressources en eau ou le suivi des ressources pastorales, c'est essentiellement des données de télédétection et de l'imagerie satellitaire. Nous essayons, par ce biais, de regarder quels sont les problèmes qui vont se poser dans le courant de l'année pour pouvoir conseiller les pasteurs. Vous voyez, notre rôle, c'est de les orienter vers les meilleurs pâturages, de leur dire là où les pâturages ne sont pas surchargés, de les orienter vers les ressources en eau. Vous savez que dans la deuxième partie de l'année, en période sèche, le bétail fait face à des problèmes d'abreuvement. Et donc, nous les conseillons. Et donc, nous développons des modules, ce que nous appelons ici des services que nous mettons à la disposition de tous les pasteurs des différentes régions de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Et sur cette base, elles peuvent s'orienter. Outils pour le suivi de la campagne agricole dans tous les pays de la CEDEAO et du SILS. Et sur cette base, nous générons l'information pays par pays et le cadre harmonisé utilise cette information justement pour générer l'information sur l'insécurité alimentaire au niveau de la région. Alors, AgriMet est tout à fait disposé à collaborer avec les pays du Maghreb arabe pour partager cet outil-là. Parce que déjà, l'Afrique de l'Ouest ayant une expérience en la matière, nous partageons déjà cet outil-là avec l'Afrique du Centre. Et nous avons été visités par la SADC également pour voir comment en fait nos outils pourront intéresser justement cette partie du pays. Nous sommes tout à fait disposés en cela. Nous avons, pour compléter justement ce dispositif, eu un dispositif de formation pour répondre aux besoins de la région. C'est ainsi que nous avons des formations également en master, des formations en ingénierie qui sont adaptées aux besoins justement de ces pays-là. Voilà ce que je pourrais dire. Donc, Agrimet est tout à fait disposé à collaborer avec les pays du Maghreb arabe justement pour partager son expérience en la matière. Voilà, merci.
Excellent, monsieur le directeur. J'en profite également pour saluer l'initiative que nos deux institutions ont prise récemment pour travailler ensemble dans la détection et l'intelligence artificielle. Je pense que ça apportera ses fruits également. Et le fait que vous aviez tout un département de formation, c'est aussi important. Vous ne faites pas seulement le travail technique, mais vous formez également à développer cette expertise-là. Je pense qu'on pourra en parler avec Ouma et les autres. Je vois des bras, Yemi et M. Bakar, c'était pour répondre aux questions concernant la nutrition. Après, je vais donner la parole à Mme Talfal. Yemi, was it to respond to the nutrition question?
Yes, if I may.
Please, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Well, that was a very interesting question. And I mean, I'm not one of the panelists, but I felt like just jumping in to say a few words about that question of importing malnutrition. I think that while from just the ordinary perspective, it is correct to say, why are we importing malnutrition? But the real question is that we have no business importing anything. It is a question of zero importation, but we're in a scenario where we are actually exporting our jobs. We are not just importing malnutrition, or we are importing something we don't have control over. We are exporting our jobs. So what we need to do is, instead of using, that's actually a double whammy. We borrow this money to buy the food. Why don't we put this money to raise our productivity and create jobs? And then you see the spillover. So my take is this. It seems like we don't have a choice. We're between a rock and a hard place. But it is not all gloomy. We do have enough resources on the continent. And the only way I can put it in a nutshell is, again, a Nigerian proverb that says, you can be thirsty standing next to a well. You can remain thirsty standing next to a well. Why? Because you don't have what it takes to get it, but there is water there, and you may still be thirsty. And that's the scenario we are in. So let's find the technology to get the water out of the well, and we'll be fine. Thank you very much.
Very good. Excellent, excellent. We are running out of time, but I'm going to take the two more to my hands. Let me take Madam Khadija Al-Fal before I then go to Brother Bakar Mohammed to close the panel. Madam Tal.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Très rapidement, la question de la nutrition est au centre de l'analyse du système alimentaire ou des systèmes alimentaires dans notre région. Et je disais tout à l'heure que le président de FARA vient de l'évoquer sans peut-être aller au fond des choses. Si vous prenez le cas de l'anacarde seulement, qu'on exporte en exportation primaire, nous exportons à l'état primaire beaucoup de nos produits agricoles. Et en même temps, nous importons des produits qui ne sont pas forcément issus des produits agricoles. C'est le cas du lait. Ce que nous importons en termes de milliards concernant le lait, concernant le blé, concernant le riz, on n'aurait pas besoin du quart pour développer notre agriculture. Et ça, c'est extraordinaire qu'on ait des produits agricoles bio, parce que nos parents n'ont pas le temps d'utiliser des engrais et tout ça. Tout est bio en Afrique presque. Et on se met à importer des choses qui ne sont pas même agricoles. C'est la couleur seulement qu'on nous envoie. Et nous sommes en train de consommer. tout en laissant partir nos produits agricoles à l'état primaire. Donc, l'Afrique doit déjà arrêter l'exportation à l'état primaire s'il veut construire une certaine main-d'œuvre. Économiquement parlant, c'est insoutenable de continuer à exporter. Ce qui est bien est de prendre tout ce qu'on t'envoie à l'importation. Donc, je voulais à ce niveau, Monsieur le Président, vous inviter à vous arrêter sur les efforts des femmes sur la transformation des produits agricoles. La transformation est devenue maintenant quelque chose d'extraordinaire qu'on devait pouvoir renforcer, et soutenir, et pour la mise à l'échelle des produits locaux qui sont produits et de très bonne qualité. Il y a 2 pays qui ont commencé dans notre région à valoriser leurs produits locaux faits par les femmes, c'est le Burkina et le Niger. Nous pensons qu'il est temps, Monsieur le Président, qu'on puisse s'arrêter sur ce que nous avons de mieux, ce que nous produisons. Aussi longtemps qu'on se mettra à importer, à prendre toutes nos ressources à envoyer à l'extérieur, aussi longtemps l'appel de l'Union africaine à l'investissement agricole ne verra pas le jour. Et là, nous avons des problèmes d'infrastructures agricoles. Dans mon pays, on produit des oignons qu'on est en train de jeter, faute d'espace pour le conserver. Il n'y a pas de place de stockage de l'agriculture. Quand on parle d'infrastructures, dans nos pays, on pense que c'est le goudron, c'est les grandes infrastructures. Les infrastructures agricoles ne sont pas encore considérées. C'est pour toutes ces raisons que, Monsieur le Président, sans pouvoir trouver le temps d'approfondir toutes les questions, vraiment, nous sommes heureux d'avoir pris part à ça, de pointer quelques avis sur le problème. Et c'est pour qu'on puisse soutenir comment on doit construire une certaine résilience alimentaire dans notre région en soutenant les efforts et les initiatives et les innovations qui sont faites dans nos transformations de notre agriculture. Merci.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bakar, I did see your hands up. Do you still want to say something very brief, maybe 1 minute, so we can open the, we can move to the group session?
Oui,
Let's go ahead.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Dr Badiane. C'est juste, je voudrais dire 2 éléments très importants par rapport à la question qui concerne la sécurité sanitaire des aliments que les participants avaient soulevé par rapport aux importations. Je crois qu'il faut retenir une chose, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, l'Union africaine a pris conscience de ces importations massives qui sont réalisées par les États membres. Et il y a une initiative qui est en cours, c'est la création d'une agence de sécurité sanitaire des aliments qui, avec l'installation peut-être d'un laboratoire de référence qui pourra aider les pays à faire face à ces produits, d'où venant, si je peux employer le terme, puisqu'on est devenu carrément un continent poubelle où on nous envoie toutes sortes de produits alimentaires. La deuxième chose que je voudrais relever, c'est que il faut que déjà au niveau des États, comme Mme Fall l'a dit, Khadi Fall l'a dit, il faut que les États puissent sérieusement investir dans des infrastructures d'analyse des produits alimentaires qui viennent, notamment le cas, je vais donner le cas du Gabon avec l'AGASA, l'Agence gabonaise de sécurité alimentaire, et également avec le Tchad, qui ont investi sur le SECOGDA, qui est le centre d'analyse des produits alimentaires. Donc, je crois que les États doivent beaucoup plus investir dans ce sens et proposer également un programme de substitution des produits importés afin de faire face à ces produits tout venant. Voilà ce que je voudrais ajouter par rapport à ce que les collègues ont dit.
C'est super. Fawzia, I don't hope you have your hands up, right? You can do that in the working groups. Okay, take 30 seconds.
Oui,
go ahead then.
Oui.
Allez-y. Vous voulez le faire maintenant?
Si
30 secondes? Ok. S'il vous plaît.
D'accord, merci rapidement parce que au fait ce qui vient d'être dit par ma chère sœur Tal et aussi par mon frère Abakar m'ont en fait interpellé. Donc moi ce que je voulais ajouter par rapport à ça, c'est que au niveau de l'Afrique, nous avons à travailler sur l'infrastructure agricole, ça c'est vrai, mais aussi sur l'organisation de secteurs, l'organisation des éleveurs, l'organisation des producteurs, des petits producteurs, parce que on a un savoir-faire extraordinaire qu'on peut mettre en valeur à travers cette organisation de ces acteurs-là. Et là, on peut vraiment produire et manger bio et faire face par ces gestes-là, on peut aussi, et par ces stratégies-là, on peut faire face à ces importations et à ces aliments qu'on apporte effectivement qui ne sont pas sanitaires du tout et qui ne sont pas bonnes pour la santé. Donc, voilà ce que je voulais dire et merci.
Merci, Fauzia, and thank you to everyone who's been part of this. Sorry to the organizing team that we've been a little bit over time, but I will then therefore just hand over to Julie or Sitsi, whoever it is from the team, to help us now get into the breakout sessions. So over to you.
Thank you, Usman. I'd like to ask Sheikh from our communications to tell us how the breakout rooms will be organized. Sheikh, can you let us know?
Sure. So we have 4 breakout rooms. We have also already made the dispatching. There are some who will remain to the main plenary session, and they will be provided French and English interpretation. There is 1 breakout room in French and 2 others in English. But you won't need to take any action. We have already pre-assigned you to your breakout rooms. Thank you.
What happens, we just stay where we are, and then we'll automatically go into the new breakout room, and then we start from there. The moderators and others will be in those rooms, right?
Yes, they are facilitators in each breakout room.
Okay, so we don't need to do anything. We just stay where we are now, and we'll go into that room.
And you will be transferred to your breakout.
Thank you. Thank you.
Julie,
all right, then let's go and do that.
Yes, Julie, can you just confirm that the breakout room will last 50 minutes?
I think that we will have to shorten it a little bit. Let's try to do 40 minutes so that we can still have a 5-minute break and then our last session at the end.
Okay.
So we'll try to stick to the original end time.
Thank you guys for doing that. And sorry for the delay here.
No problem. We have a lot to say.
So you can now accept the invitation to join your breakout room, please.
Sheikh, where's the invitation to accept? Where's the invitation, Sheikh, that we need to accept?
I think normally it should pop up on our screen. I don't see one yet, though, for myself.
Hi, everyone. Actually, the breakout room are already set. So they are already there in the breakout room. So this is the main room.
We still have 27 people here. Where's half of the those who attended? Or this is okay like that?
Yes, it is okay like that.
Okay.
We have moved.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Okay, then you go ahead with whoever is the chair from this room.
So which, this is Simba here, which group is actually in the main auditorium, in the main room?
I think thanks, Professor.
Which groups are meeting in the main room that we are still, the 27 that have not moved?
I think that
yes, it is. Go ahead, Julie.
I'm sorry. I think that this is group 1, which is facilitated by you, Professor Sibanda. Is that correct, Sheikh?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that's where he is. Yeah.
We needed to confirm that because we're not sure who has moved where, etc. So since we didn't get an invitation. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Simba Sibanda. I'm with FANAPAN, and I'll be moderating this group. We've just below, well, it's now 35 minutes. So I'd suggest we spend about maybe maximum 8 minutes on each question, and then we can move on to the next. So hopefully we can finish the 4 questions. Francis, are you on? That's our rapporteur, my colleague from FANAPAN.
Prof. Kanto here. I will be replacing him.
Okay, Kanto. All right. Okay, so let's get on with the questions. I think what we want to do is not to have too much discussion. It's almost like brainstorming. So let's have the points. And if they're not clear, a brief explanation. Otherwise, we just want us to be throwing ideas. So the first question, we want to discuss the challenges and opportunities to transforming African food systems to ensure that they are sustainable and resilient. So we're looking at, maybe let's just look at some challenges first, quickly, and then we can also look at opportunities. Anyone, please feel free to go ahead. If you feel it will speed things up, you can also use the chat box and make it short as well. So yeah, please, I'm looking at the screen here to see if there's any hands or anyone that wants to come through. If I can't see you and there's no one speaking, please just feel free to unmute and go ahead and speak. Challenges and food systems. Some of these issues were discussed from the main presentation as well as the panelists, but it could be that you may have other things that have not been discussed as yet. I'm still waiting. There's 21 of us here, so we must have a lot of ideas.
Hi.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Just identify yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of the participation from the African Development Bank. Okay. And my one challenge that I would like to raise is how Africa can address food system transformation without impacting on its biodiversity. One of the major concerns of Africa is its biodiversity, and we want to address those challenges without also losing what makes this continent so unique. That's my contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So biodiversity, I think the issue of monocultures has also been a major issue related to biodiversity. So yeah, so that's a great point there. That's a challenge that we have. Any other challenges?
Event writing.
Yes, sorry. I'm sure we can take the opportunities at the same time, seeing as there doesn't seem to be too many challenges coming our way. If you have some opportunity that you foresee, we had a few of some of them, please go ahead.
Yes, may I come in again? Sorry, since nobody is participating.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we spoke a lot about technology and the role of technology in the main session. However, Africa is a consumer continent. We are not creating our own technology, and thus we remain consumers of technologies that have been done elsewhere. So the main challenge here is also how can we, or what are the actions that we can do to make our own technology that is adapted to the education level that we have and that are adapted to our needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I think that's a great challenge, especially to my colleague, Dr. Yemi from FARA. we are consumers of technologies. So, yeah. And most of the time we take these technologies from outside and we try and apply directly, and in most cases they don't work. So we need to develop our own. Thanks for those points. Any more challenges or opportunities?
Hi, Prof. Chirizi from Fonapan.
Yes, please go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, so in my point of view, in terms of dealing with the challenge that deals with sustainable or resilient food systems, for me, we really need to differentiate between the questions that deals with the content. With the content, I mean, in terms of then how do we deal with food system issues as then it interlaces to so many nexus issues. And the second issue deals with the process itself in terms of how do we, as researchers, policy analysts, then generate our evidence, translate the evidence, and also make sure that the evidence is used for decisions, practice, and policy. So with regard to bucket work number one on content, we know that climate change is a major issue. We know that malnutrition is a major issue. But then how can we then, as transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary scholars or researchers or practitioners, then bring our minds together in terms of defining the questions that we really need to answer to make sure that we deliver for Africa. And the other thing that relates to that is the question about how can we as institutions and individuals collaborate to make sure that we're not duplicating. What is core here or what is central here is how then do we bring in an issue of co-creation to make sure that the defining of problem, the defining of the agenda is bottom up as much as some of the priorities then are top down. In terms of the second bucket of issues that I talked to in terms of the processes, then we know that as researchers, then we struggle in terms of translating research evidence. The people that are supposed to use the evidence, then they don't have capacity or skills to decode or appraise the evidence. How then can we build the capacity to make sure that the research evidence that we are generating contribute positively in terms of informing the policy agenda? Over.
Thank you, TM. So it's agenda setting and how we can work together to do that, whether bottom up as well as top down. We need to come up with a mechanism that works for us. And of course, the issue of capacity and also communication between the technocrats and the policymakers so that we're on the same page. I think there are a lot of solutions out there which have not found their way into policies because the communication just hasn't happened well. Thanks for that, TM. Do we have any other points on this one before we move on to the next question?
Oui,
so far we've had the issues of biodiversity. Yes.
Oui, c'est M. Garba de la Banque africaine de développement. Je peux?
Yes, please.
Yes, please go ahead. And...
OK. Non, je voulais quand même insister sur un aspect. Je pense tout à l'heure dans la discussion en plein air, il est ressorti toute la question de mettre en place des infrastructures adéquates, toute la question de faire en sorte que les petits producteurs aient accès à des technologies, aux solutions pour renforcer la résilience. Mais le point clé, bien sûr, c'est compte tenu du niveau de pauvreté de ces producteurs et par rapport aussi à la capacité financière de nos pays, il y a quand même le défi de savoir comment mobiliser les ressources importantes, le financement requis pour cette transformation. Parce que c'est sûr que ça va prendre des investissements conséquents si on veut vraiment inverser la tendance, parce que la demande la demande en produits chaque jour, ça augmente. Et nous devons donc non seulement augmenter la productivité, assurer la durabilité, mais aussi augmenter la productivité agricole pour être capable de suivre le rythme de la croissance. Donc, à ce niveau, il faut vraiment qu'il y ait le défi de pouvoir mettre en place un mécanisme de financement qui puisse assurer le besoin en financement de cette transformation qui est requise. Donc, je pense que c'est quand même un défi important compte tenu du niveau de pauvreté et aussi des populations et des priorités diverses de nos pays et des ressources limitées de nos États. Donc, c'est ce point-là sur l'enjeu du financement de cette transformation qui est un défi majeur, je pense, pour le continent. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Financing, obviously we need to come up with innovating financing options. Our governments don't seem to be putting enough into agriculture and food systems, so that's a major challenge there. So with your permission, let's move to question B, but otherwise, if you think of another challenge or opportunity, please feel free to come through. But what I would like us to talk about is to look at some solutions. So the second question is, would like to hear from you what you would consider as good practices. Some people will say best practice, good practices, lessons learned, technological innovations, collaborations, and policies that have worked elsewhere or even in our member states that would like to share that could actually provide some solutions. Could you share any best practice, any good practices, whether it could be technology, working policy interventions that countries have adopted that you think have actually addressed this issue of food systems and resilience? Anyone, please feel free to come through. So we're talking solutions, these are best practice, good practices that have worked. Could be within the region, within member states, preferably, but they can be from any other area that we think would be worthy to be considered. Can we come up with anything, colleagues?
May I come in?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to propose two examples of, as you said, what solutions can be replicated elsewhere and what are maybe good practices in terms of transformation of food systems that can be adopted. So on the continent in Africa, one example is in Nigeria. The continent is full of mainly smallholder farmers, and the Smallholder Farmers Foundation in Nigeria has put in place a radio session where they every week, week they have a session on agriculture. It's like an extension service with trainings and material and information for farmers that are not very knowledgeable when it comes to using of technology, like smartphones, etc., and internet, and they don't have access to internet, etc. So that's one good practice I think the continent can replicate elsewhere. Another good lesson is sharing economy. So we have very good examples of sharing, let's say, tractors in Kenya, where through an application, through a solution on your smartphone, smallholders that have usually very small plots, right? They cannot afford to buy a tractor. So digital solutions have come now, and these digital solutions make us share economy. So they create also jobs for people who can afford to buy tractors, but that do not have plots. And so this kind of shared economy is something that I believe can be one part of the solution for the transformation of food system in Africa.
Thank you there. So we're talking of communication tools, but also the shared economy. I mean, there are a lot of idle assets out there which the shared economy can take advantage of. Thanks for those points. Can we come up with any other points or what we consider as good practices, solutions?
Oui, si vous permettez, Chair.
Yes, please, go ahead.
OK. Non, je vais venir en tout cas sur un exemple d'un des programmes phares de la Banque africaine de développement qui met l'accent sur la diffusion des technologies. Nous le savons tous, en tout cas, que l'accès aux technologies, comme on a dit tantôt, est une contrainte majeure. Et une des solutions, c'est vraiment de voir dans quelle mesure nous pouvons promouvoir et diffuser des technologies adaptées au contexte africain. Nous savons tous, en tout cas, à travers les travaux de recherche des différentes institutions de recherche en Afrique, à travers aussi les centres de recherche internationaux, le CGA qui travaille en Afrique, il y a des solutions à différents niveaux qui ont été, des technologies qui ont été développées et qui sont prêtes pour être diffusées à grande échelle pour la transformation des systèmes alimentaires. La seule contrainte véritablement, c'est comment faciliter l'accès à ces technologies-là aux petits producteurs, aux éleveurs, etc. Et à ce niveau, la Banque africaine de développement a initié depuis 2016 un programme qu'on appelle Technologie pour la transformation de l'agriculture africaine, TAT, qui a mis l'accent véritablement, qui est en train de mettre des infrastructures régionales et nationales pour pouvoir diffuser des technologies en partenariat avec les CGA. C'est-à-dire, l'idée, c'est que ce programme a fait le répertoire de toutes les technologies qui sont disponibles, testées pour diffusion. On est en train de mettre en place aussi les infrastructures régionales pour faciliter la diffusion de ces technologies et aussi des expériences au niveau national. Et à date, en tout cas, dans des domaines comme le blé, par exemple, au Soudan, en 3 ans, le programme a permis de doubler la production du blé. Il y a la même initiative qui est en cours en Éthiopie aussi, et puis au Kenya pour le maïs. Donc, disons, en tout cas, à travers ce programme, c'est un programme qui facilite l'accès aux technologies avec une approche qui a été développée pour faciliter le transfert des technologies des centres de recherche à travers le secteur privé au pays. Et nous pensons que c'est une des solutions. Et l'ambition de ce programme-là, bien sûr, qui est à la disposition des pays africains, c'est d'ici 2025 d'avoir au moins 40 millions de petits producteurs qui ont accès à des technologies à grande échelle. Et ça, c'est quand même important parce que rien que là où on est rendu maintenant avec le contexte du changement climatique, rien qu'avec des semences améliorées, qui sont résistantes à la chaleur, aux maladies, etc., ça peut faire toute la différence. Et nous sommes convaincus, en tout cas, que l'accès aux technologies est clé. Parce que si on compare l'Afrique aux autres continents, vous avez sur les autres continents, l'Amérique du Nord, l'Europe, moins de 5% de la population qui pratique l'agriculture et qui arrive à alimenter leur continent et puis à diffuser le surplus un peu partout. Et nous, ici, nous avons plus de 80% de notre population sur le pays qui va chaque jour au champ et qui n'arrive pas à se nourrir. Donc, une des clés, vraiment, c'est les technologies. Et il faut vraiment que nous soyons, bien sûr, il ne s'agit pas de transférer n'importe quelle technologie, mais il faudra vraiment travailler à la diffusion des technologies à grande échelle et faciliter aussi, l'autre volet, c'est la question du financement. Et là aussi, il faut dire que l'Afrique aussi a une opportunité, je pense, quand on fait les liens entre la transformation et puis la question du renforcement de la résilience, il y a des opportunités comme la finance climatique aujourd'hui, qui est aussi une fenêtre où les pays devraient mettre l'accent. Oui, on a des ressources limitées, mais les pays doivent travailler aussi à faire un plaidoyer au niveau international pour qu'il y ait le maximum de ressources qui soient mobilisées pour de la finance climatique pour le continent et qui puissent financer, être orientés vers des initiatives comme celle de la transformation des systèmes alimentaires et de la sécurité des populations. Donc, les deux options, en tout cas, nous avons ce programme-là de diffusion des technologies qui, pour nous, est un modèle et que nous avons déjà fait une première phase, il y a une deuxième phase, mais c'est vraiment un modèle de transfert de technologies des institutions de recherche avec les secteurs privés aux petits producteurs. Mais il y a aussi l'approche de mobilisation de la finance climatique, qui est aussi une des options pour pouvoir mobiliser plus de ressources pour nos pays au bénéfice des petits producteurs et puis des éleveurs pour renforcer leur sécurité alimentaire et leur résilience. Donc, je voulais juste m'arrêter sur ces deux aspects, mais la clé quand même, nous devrons faire les choses autrement en allant plus vers une agriculture climato-intelligente. Et aujourd'hui, il y a des mécanismes, des approches qui sont déjà mises en place, mais il y a surtout aussi des mécanismes innovants de financement qui sont disponibles et qui pourront être intégrés dans les projets nationaux et régionaux. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think it reminds me of Yemi's Nigerian proverb that you can be thirsty while you're standing next to a well. So it's good to know that with all these technologies, what's really left is for us to find ways of getting these technologies into the hands of those that need them. I think the third question is very much similar to the second one, because it's really saying, out of all the good practices and lessons, can you identify real game changers? What actually would take us, make us leap forward, as it were? Almost something similar to what we have had with mobile telephony, that you have a tool which is fairly highly advanced in technology, and yet it can actually be used by anybody, even in the remotest village, and it's made such a big difference to communication. Do we have anything that would put in that same category, a game changer that could actually transform the African food systems in a sustainable way, and something that will be practical, and also addressing issues of vulnerabilities, shocks, and stress? Can we come up with any sort of, that we're aware of, any game-changing solutions to African food systems? Anyone?
I see Mbachirizi.
Yes, Jim.
For me, even though I won't be direct in answering your question, for me, most of the interventions that have been done have been more on a pilot scale. And I think there is a need to do a systemic review or systematic review to take stock of what has worked where, why, and how, to make sure that when we get to stage of scaling out, scaling up, and scaling deeper, we know exactly then what has delivered for Africa. Because then the pilots that we've implemented, no pilot has failed, but in terms of whether the pilot delivered impact beyond its project life, we're not too sure. So we need to get back to understand what has really delivered for Africa. Over.
Thank you, TM. I think that's also dovetails into the last comment about the technologies that are available, which we need to make sure get to the players. So a lot of these have been at pilot level. How do we go to scale? Yeah, so that's an important thing. First of all, we need to know what has worked, and then we need to look at the scaling. Can we come up with any other ideas in this respect, game changers? Still waiting. No idea is considered unworthy, so please feel free to come forth. We have one last question, and if you want to go back to any of the other questions, if any other points, please feel free. One of the things that Africa has been, trying to get to grips with is how we can use influencers, especially high-level African champions, to advance the African perspective and solutions coming out of the region. We need some discussion on this. Any ideas on how we can do this effectively, and possibly in generic terms, if you know of any specific individuals or rather groups of people, not specific persons, but groups of people that can actually advance our agenda as Africa and to bring out African solutions. I know that
Please mute your micro.
Okay, I think they have. Okay, so we're talking of African champions. How can we make use of African champions, and what kind of people are these that we think could actually drive the African agenda so that we have a voice on the global stage? Has anybody got an idea as to how we can advance our agenda and who these champions would be? We're talking generic terms here, so we know the characteristics of the people that we could consider as champions that will push the food systems, African food systems agenda.
Hello? Hello?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Let me just jump in here and say something quickly. I have to drop off to go to another meeting, but tomorrow, the AU, and I think Osman is aware of that, the One Voice paper document will be discussed and will be presented tomorrow, AU, and I can't remember the exact name of this, the high official level technical committee chaired by our brother from South Africa. Now, that paper, I always think like it's too early to validate it and clear it and firm up the content of it, because this discussion is very important happening today. And you're talking what's the lever that we're using to influence the content of that paper now through these discussions also today. And there's more coming throughout July, more dialogues and more events are happening, and making resolutions and also coming up with ideas and suggestions. So I think the question to me is, how does academia is part of this event tomorrow, and how do we really, basically, how to carry this voice also to shape the final content of the document being discussed tomorrow? I think that's, with me, would be an avenue to do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that information. I'm sure academia will do the needful, but for the rest of the other participants, do we have any other ideas as to how we can make use of champions, and what sort of influencers can we make use of to drive the African agenda on food systems?
Yes, can I please?
Yes, please.
Yeah. En fait, ce qu'on avait dit tout à l'heure, c'est que les défis, nous les connaissons et les solutions existent. Okay? Nous avons dit que les technologies sont là. Il y a pas mal de technologies qui ont été testées en Afrique. Les infrastructures, on les connaît. Les approches, on les connaît. Le défi majeur, c'est la question du financement. Et il faut qu'en ce moment, si c'est vraiment la priorité des priorités du continent, il faut que le continent puisse lancer une initiative continentale sur laquelle, pour régler, adresser la question du financement de la sécurité alimentaire et de la transformation des systèmes alimentaires. Et à ce niveau, en tout cas, nous, au niveau de la Banque africaine de développement, nous sommes en train d'initier, et je pense qu'il faut que ce soit une initiative continentale, la mise en place d'un fonds de sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle en Afrique. Certes, il y a des fonds qui existent à d'autres endroits, comme le GASP, l'initiative GASP, etc., le programme GASP de la Banque mondiale, tout ça. Mais ici, il faut vraiment que le continent puisse se doter de cet outil-là, parce qu'on ne peut pas continuer à dire que c'est une priorité pour le continent, que nous avons des millions et des millions chaque année de populations qui sont vulnérables, et puis que chaque année, ce problème-là s'aggrave, et ne pas se doter de cet outil-là. Et donc, si nous sommes capables, en tout cas, de lancer cette initiative, comment mettre en place ce fonds de sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle en Afrique, et en ce moment aussi embarquer tous nos champions pour faire les plaidoyers. Je donne quand même à titre d'exemple pour ceux qui ont suivi, mais c'est passé dans les communiqués, le dernier communiqué du sommet du G7, il y avait une initiative sur l'accès à l'énergie renouvelable qui a été adoptée, un financement, je pense, je ne sais pas si c'est de 2 milliards ou de 3 milliards de dollars, a été adopté lors du dernier G7. Mais ce n'est pas ça a été présenté comme étant une priorité. Mais il faut aussi que le continent, dans le cadre du sommet qui va voir, comment est-ce qu'on va mobiliser nos partenaires pour vraiment travailler sur cette question de financement. Et pour ne pas diluer cela, il faut que nous partons là-bas avec une proposition d'un outil continental. Et il ne s'agit pas seulement de demander aux autres donateurs, même les pays pourront contribuer, mais la question, c'est de dire comment est-ce que nous pouvons adopter cet instrument important d'un fonds de sécurité alimentaire en Afrique qui pourra financer le développement des technologies, qui pourra financer des opérations, qui pourra financer tout le développement des politiques, etc., mais qui serait l'instrument majeur et qui donnera à l'Afrique véritablement un outil à sa disposition pour pouvoir régler cette question et non pas attendre chaque fois qu'on nous vienne avec des solutions partielles. Donc, moi, c'est comme ça que je vois ça. Et je pense que s'il y a d'autres initiatives comme ça, mais l'idée, c'est que nous pouvons mobiliser tous nos champions autour de cette initiative pour que, à l'occasion de ce sommet, qu'on puisse mobiliser au maximum et que nous puissions travailler à concrétiser cet élément. Il y a plusieurs initiatives comme ça qui existent dans le monde et à l'échelle de certains continents. Mais ce point-là précis, c'est un point crucial pour notre continent. Et je pense, en tout cas, c'est une des pistes pour régler la question du financement, qui est la question clé. Sinon, les solutions existent. Mais il faut d'abord, quand on a les ressources, en ce moment, au niveau de chaque pays, il s'agira en ce moment d'utiliser les acteurs, les techniciens pour pouvoir transformer les instruments et les mettre à la disposition des populations pour pouvoir avoir un impact. Mais réglons d'abord la question de la contrainte de financement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It sounds as if the whole issue, yes, I agree with you that we've had these numbers ad infinitum, and all the time, all meetings, we start off with so many millions malnourished, et cetera. We kind of like, in a sense, playing the victim card a bit too much. The solutions are there, as you say. We have to put our money where our mouth is. We just need to get, I think we do have the institutions that can be champions and spokespersons for Africa. We have the African Union Commission. We also have the REX. We have the national or member state leadership, the presidents. And we have, I know that African Union even has a champion for nutrition. So it's not, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. What is missing is probably that we need to package the information to capacitate the champions so that they know what they need to raise when they go to this international fora, particularly this UN Food System Summit. But also at regional level, we need to see some seriousness in terms of countries committing resources to issues of food and nutrition security, the issues of food systems, and we just have to put a stop to the trend that we have, that we continue to be the continent where malnutrition is on the increase in absolute terms, when all other regions, in fact, are reducing malnutrition. So thanks very much for that point. We only have a couple of minutes before we finish. I don't know if anyone has any sort of last point or parting shot.
May I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. On the question number 4 on how we can use influencers to champion food security changes in Africa, you have spoken about the content, but also using the right canal is of the same importance. That's your question. During the last week, we've seen a very, food systems is also about nutrition. And during the last week, we have seen a very strong message from one of the most famous soccer football players during the European Cup Championship that has removed a very famous soda brand from his table. And Africa is a very young continent where sports plays a very important, is very popular. And so maybe thinking about sports champions as drivers for this kind of nutritious behavioral change is something we need to address. We need to maybe scope. Everyone have seen the huge impact of that Cristiano Ronaldo removing the brand from behind, and putting it. And I think that shows the impact that football players and sports in general players can have on the population, young populations like in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Thank you. That's a great example. So we need role models that people look up to and to speak on issues that are important for food systems, nutrition being one of them, eating right and doing the right thing. I mean, they could equally push non-nutritional products and they'll be very popular. So that's a good point there. But of course, as everything with branding, we need to select the appropriate people that would not cause collateral damage. So the selection of these champions needs to be done carefully so that they have a track history of their footprint in the past. Has also been one that they're credible champions in that respect. I think that's a good point to end on. I hope that our rapporteur has captured most of the important points which we can share with the chief rapporteur. I think a few minutes ago, we saw the notice that will be automatically moving back into the main plenary. And I think everybody's going to come back to join us here. But if until they do, if you have any other points, please feel free to share them. Either.
Hi, Simba Chirizi here.
Hi, Tim.
At Fanapan, we, amongst other communication tools or models that we use, we believe that sometimes it's important to empower those that are affected by the problem to communicate those problems by themselves. So we have used the theater as a communication tool where those that are affected by the problem are empowered to communicate their issues and also opportunities which they can leverage on to solve the problems that they're encountering in their livelihoods. So that is a way of also trying to communicate to make sure that you empower those that are affected by the problem to articulate those in a safe environment for them, in a theatrical manner for those that are entrusted to make decisions and policies, for them to fully appreciate the challenges that the farmers are going through. Over.
Thank you for that, TM. So the question is, who is telling the story? So I think Africans must tell their own stories. It's good to have champions from elsewhere, but the champions obviously need to come from Africa. And they need, as TM says, we also need to look at local level, those people that are affected by the challenges that we're trying to solve, to speak on their own behalf. And that will be more convincing and actually move mountains, so to speak. I think, we've covered a wide breadth from challenges, opportunities, and also, the solutions, best practice. So I hope that, this will add value to the dialogue. Thank you very much. And I can see other people coming back into the plenary. So for group one, we'll stop here. Thank you. And thanks to all the group one members for your participation.
Thank you, Professor Sibanda, and thank you again, everyone, for your participation. And we actually have a very short break on the agenda right now until 15 minutes after the hour. So I know that leaves only 2 minutes, but
yeah,
people can run and get a quick drink of water if you need to, and we'll reconvene in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Hello, Sheikh, can you let us know, are all of the breakout rooms back into the main room now?
Yes, we have closed all the breakout rooms.
Great, thank you. So before we go to our final session of the day, could we have people please turn on their cameras so that our communications can take a quick group picture? It's nice to see a few faces.
Usually some of us are at home.
I well understand.
Okay.
If your background allows, please turn on your camera, and if it doesn't, no problem. And we are very understanding of clutter in the background. So, Sheikh, if you could maybe give us a countdown 1, 2, 3 for when we can smile for the picture.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm not yet seeing the pictures.
I do. I see above the screen, we have a lot of people who have turned their cameras on.
Yeah, I think if you go to gallery, you can see them.
Share, it's okay. I have taken some pictures.
Oh, great.
Okay. Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Babakar. Thank you, everybody, for turning on your camera. And we're going to move now to our final stage of today's event. Again, I'm Julie Collins from Academia 2063, and I'm going to share some quick reporting from all of our 4 breakout rooms. Thank you again to the facilitators of the breakout groups. Thank you to the rapporteurs who have given notes for this reporting back. And thank you very much, a warm thank you to all the participants in the breakout rooms. I was in the first breakout room and we had a very rich discussion on the challenges, the best practices, the possible game-changing solutions, and also the role of champions. And I know that the other breakout rooms had very rich discussions too. So I'm just going to briefly summarize some of what we discussed in each of the 4 groups, and then we will close today's event after a quick second round of question and answer. So in group number 1, the challenges that we discussed were first related to how to advance the transformation of food systems in Africa without threatening biodiversity, which is a very important benefit that Africa has now and that needs to remain strong in the future. We also talked about the challenge related to Africa being a consumer of technology and needing to increase capacities to create technology in Africa that's adapted to the needs of Africans. We also talked about how to make sure that we as individuals and institutions are not collaborating and not duplicating work, how to ensure also strong communication between the technocrats and the research centers, which are creating technologies and solutions, and the farmers who are using them. And we talked about the potential of having the private sector to be a channel to transmit these new technologies to their users. We talked about the need to have adequate infrastructure in place for smallholder farmers. We talked about the challenge of a lack of financial mechanisms that are adapted for the African region, and also how food systems issues relate to other food nexus issues. For example, how can multidisciplinary skills, so the skills of nutritionists, of researchers, of climatologists, people doing research on climate change, how can they come together to respond to the needs of food systems? And we also talked about financing as a very large challenge. In fact, we already have a lot of technologies. We already have a lot of solutions for the problems that exist. And financing is a very major gap. And so that led us into our discussion on best practices and innovative collaborations that are happening now. We talked about the African Development Bank, which is putting in place a fund to support nutrition and food security in Africa. And they're also working on access to technology, so better disseminating the technologies that exist in Africa and also in other regions, how to facilitate their dissemination to smallholder farmers in Africa across the private sector. In terms of research of reaching smallholder farmers, we talked about something that's happening in Nigeria now with the Smallholder Farmers Foundation. They have a weekly radio session, a weekly radio show with a session that does training and information on agriculture for all of the listeners, the smallholder farmers who are able to access this information through the radio. And similarly, digital solutions, not only to transmit information, but also to permit a sharing economy, is another important solution that is being enacted in some place. There are smartphone apps that can allow farmers to communicate around shared equipment. For example, a farmer that isn't able to finance their own tractor can be part of a sharing economy where tractors and similar equipment are shared across farmers. So we talked about, among these best practices and solutions, what do we see as the real game-changing solutions that can really affect change at scale? And we discussed basically how we can go about identifying these game-changing solutions. There have been a lot of pilots done by our different organizations in different parts of Africa. So there is a need to take a systematic look at the pilots that have been done and look at which solutions have delivered, not only in the lifetime of the project, but after the lifetime of the project. And of these solutions, identify them, narrow in on them, and then see how we can scale them up to other areas. We also talked about prioritizing the question of financing. Since we do have a lot of solutions, we know them, and financing is really the biggest gap right now. And finally, we discussed the role of high-level champions that can advance solutions. So we talked about tomorrow, there's going to be discussion at the level of the African Union around the unified African voice going into the Food Systems Summit. We talked about how our different organizations can have a role in shaping the content of that paper, and Academia 2063 will be part of these discussions and will take everything that we have discussed today at this dialogue to those discussions around the African voice going into the Food Systems Summit. So we talked about a need to package the information that we have so that champions know what to say and what to advocate for. We talked about Africa as a young continent and the need to take into account young personalities and the things that young people are interested in. We talked about Cristiano Ronaldo, who removed Coca-Cola in the EU Football League, as a really great example of what champions can do to affect behavior change. And on a more general level, the need to look for sports figures and other champions appealing to young people who can communicate in any place where we want to influence change at a large scale. Finally, talked about the need to empower people who are facing their problems to be the people who talks about their problems. So empower Africans to speak for Africans, empower the people who are facing issues in their livelihoods to be the ones who speak about these issues and about potential solutions. So I'm going to pass to some of the other groups, and thank you again to the participants and to the rapporteurs. In group 2, the group discussed, again, challenges related to climate change, which are a very big area facing Africa. In addition, there are demographic challenges, there are market challenges, there are human capital issues and the need for capacity building across the value chain. And there's also, of course, as we discussed also in group 1, major financing issues and a need for financing mechanisms to fund the solutions that we have. We talked about, as opportunities, group 2 talked about the existence of existing groups and professional associations that can be strengthened. There's a lot of existing tools and institutions that can be strengthened in order to play their role more effectively. Best practices included the example of MIFA in Togo, and maybe someone from group 2 can share a link to that in the chat so that people who want to learn more about that can take a look. Other best practices were the pooling of action among different groups and the strengthening of entrepreneurship. In terms of game-changing solutions, the group 2 talked about crowdfunding as a financing mechanism, and also about artificial intelligence, which is an important solution to monitor the use of natural resources and also monitoring agricultural production. There's a lot of scope for artificial intelligence to increase the availability of information and also the ability of different parties to work together. And then finally, the group 2 identified a few potential champions, including the former president of Nigeria and the president of Rwanda, and mentioned that champions can be designated by region. Group 3 also talked about some of the challenges that we're seeing in terms of land degradation, which is definitely a very important threat to agricultural production in Africa, and also post-harvest losses as an area that's really challenging the ability of the continent to ensure food security. And agricultural practices are contributing now to some challenges, so there's a need to look at different practices, climate smart practices that can mitigate instead of worsen some of the land degradation and climate challenges being faced. So opportunities include agro-processing, which is a very major opportunity to increase incomes, to create employment opportunities, to add value, also to better able smallholders to reach demand in urban areas. And digital technology, which was also mentioned by another group, was highlighted as a really important opportunity to improve food systems. So best practices, this group 3 talked about the way that policy institutions collaborate can be explored to improve food systems. So scope for better collaboration between different agencies, a need to refocus on the whole value chain, which also is in a similar vein to the kind of overarching, one of the overarching goals of the Food Systems Summit, which is to look at food systems holistically, and not bit by bit, but to look at how the whole system works together. Game-changing solutions included bringing farmers to the center of all the initiatives, which again echoes some of what we talked about in group 1, having the people who are affected by these issues be the people to be at the center of the communications and also the solutions to solve these issues. And then finally, group 4 talked about challenges of accessing data and technologies. It's not easy to have access to these, and the availability of data to inform policies and decision makers. And this is, of course, a huge challenge that we all face. Group 4 talked about infrastructure, including roads, but also electricity, water, and digital infrastructure, and that governments need to invest more in infrastructure. We talked about group 4 talked about the implementation of plans and programs. We do have a lot of policies and strategies where implementation has not been as strong as we would have liked to see. And so a key challenge is implementing the programs and plans that we have. Some best practices include the annual Trends and Outlook report of ATOR, produced by RISAX, which is facilitated here at Academia 2063. And this is a report where we look at the very best state-of-the-art research around different issues affecting food systems, agriculture, and the ability of the continent to achieve the Malabo goals. And we collect findings and knowledge on how Africa can better meet these goals. So the ATOR is a good resource that we can continue to use. An e-learning platform to share information with different stakeholders is a best practice. So dissemination of knowledge and evidence. There's a lot of innovation going on right now in data and knowledge visualization to better communicate lessons to policymakers and to different actors. Remote sensing data and artificial intelligence, as another group mentioned, is an important potential solution to solving a lot of problems in agriculture. Mechanization, small-scale irrigation, are both important practices and opportunities to look at further. And under this, the MAMO panel, the Malabo Montpellier panel, which is another program of Academia 2063, collects lessons from countries around the continent that have performed well in different areas and collects these in some very easy to access brief reports that can be looked at to crystallize the very best practices. Game-changing solutions that Group 4 talked about are the use of artificial intelligence to share information across farmers. In Kenya, there's an example of using voice messaging to share information, and inclusive platforms and processes that allow a wide range of stakeholders to share information, such as agricultural joint sector reviews, are also an important solution to widen the group that participates in agricultural planning and to give a voice to different actors. We need more research on understanding climate change. It's important that technology be adapted to uses in Africa. And then finally, the issue of funding, as mentioned by other groups, is very, very important and is necessary to put in place all the other solutions that we have. And then finally, Group 4 discussed the role of champions and the need for celebrities who can spread messages in an interesting way. There is an example that in Germany, academics deal with food security issues. That could be something to look at. And that the winner of the Africa Food Prize could perhaps be a champion who could help to communicate some solutions that are available. So thank you for I know that was a lot of information very quickly. It reflects just how detailed these discussions were, how many interesting opportunities came up, how many solutions were mentioned. So even though my reporting was very quick and brief, rest assured that our rapporteurs have been able to capture that and are going to be sharing this information with the planners of the UN Food Systems Summit so that our suggestions of today are taken into account and inform the deliberations of the summit. So thank you again very much for that. And we have time on the agenda for a short question and answer period. I think we have time. Let's see, I think that we have time just for 5 or 10 minutes of questions. But if anyone has questions about what I've shared just now, or if anyone has comments, something that they'd like to add that came out of the breakout sessions, now would be the time to share that. Afterwards, we'll have our closing from Dr. Chilidzi Madzivandila of FANERPAN, and we'll also have a closing statement from Alain C. Traoré of ECOWAS. But before we go into that, do we have any questions or comments on the breakout room discussions? You can raise a hand if so, or if you'd like, you can put a comment in the chat box also. Okay, thank you. There's a question from Badebo Odularu, wondering how affordable digital solutions are to farmers. This is an excellent question, thank you. And why don't we maybe open the field? Perhaps Dr. Racine Lee of Academia 2063 would like to answer this, but if anyone else would like to answer this question or contribute a thought in this area, please just raise your hand and I'll call on you.
Hi, Julie. Just for that, I have maybe a few thoughts. Usually developing technology in Africa is costly to entrepreneurs in the private sector because the cost of collecting data, the cost of having access to cloud computing, and the cost to hire experts in data visualization or artificial intelligence or machine learning and other technologies, what have you, will reflect the cost, the price of the digital technology solutions. So therefore, the farmers will bear the entire cost of that process. So therefore, this is where I think policy innovation can be interesting in subsidizing access to cloud computing, for example, or access to data. As we discussed, I think a few days ago when we were launching AGWA, the Africa Agriculture Watch, which is a platform mixing remote sensing and machine learning to decision making by providing predictions in yield and agricultural production. There's a need to facilitate access to data and also for countries to centralize the data and make it available. Because what we realize in Africa is a gap between data availability and data capacity. The capacity to generate data, but actually they have an issue of data availability, which is not being collected at all. So I think that entire system of issues is what is making digital solution expensive for farmers mainly. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Racine. Thank you. A very important issue and something that I know that we'll continue to have many conversations about after today. And So the AGWA website has been shared in the chat for anyone who is interested in taking a look at that. So I apologize for cutting off our question and answer, and I know that we all have a lot more to talk about, but we're pretty close to the end of today's session. So I would like to ask our closing speakers to take the floor. And first, we're going to hear from Dr. Chilidzi Madzivandila, the CEO and head of mission of FANERPAN. And after that, we'll have the final closing from Mr. Alain C. Traoré, the Director of Agriculture and Rural Development of ECOWAS. So thank you, everyone, and over to you, Dr. Chilidzi.
Thank you, Chief Rapporteur, for the synthesis of the deliberation. But first, let me thank Dr. Osman Badiani, Academia 2063 Executive Chair, and also the Dialogue Chairperson and Moderator. Let me also thank my dear brother, Executive Director Farah, and FANAPAN Board Member, Dr. Yemi Akibimagio. Thank you so much for the keynote address. Indeed, you have articulated the challenges and opportunity to transform our African agriculture and food systems very well. Indeed, there is a need for the promising innovation and investment to 1, be scaled out, 2, to be scaled up, and 3, to be scaled deeper. Let me also thank our distinguished panelists and discussants. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished participants, greetings to you all. Thank you for the fruitful deliberation we have just had. By participating in this dialogue today, we'll be able to 1, primarily build a resilient and sustainable food systems in Africa, and 2, secondarily, to mobilize and consolidate One Africa voice. And I need to repeat this one. The intention of this dialogue is to mobilize and consolidate One Africa voice. By doing that, we'll build the momentum towards the UN Food System Summit, which is abbreviated UNFSS. Us at FANAPAN draws extreme satisfaction from the 3 things that are directly related to our reason for existence. These are 1, convening, and 2, common agenda and voice, and 3, partnerships. With the latter, the keynote address has already underscored to say, if we go it alone, we will not go too far. But if we want to go an extra mile, we have to partner. Convening is an integral part of the FANAPAN DNA. It is spelled out in the network's mandate. The founding fathers of FANAPAN were conscious of the existence of divergent views and also competing interests from the multiple stakeholders that we interact with, and valued the need for convening all-inclusive dialogue platforms to make sure that collectively we bring together these voices so that we have one voice which articulate issues that is affecting our continent. This is in line with the principle of the UNFSS, which support inclusive multi-stakeholder processes and approaches that bring in diverse perspectives to enable stakeholders to find alignment through understanding and to design policy options that deliver against multiple goals across the various food systems. And for this, I mean in terms of different scales and levels. This dialogue today and other related ones that we as FANAPAN we have convened with partners has brought to the table a diverse stakeholder voices that we are consolidating here today so that we achieve the one voice that the theme of this dialogue is talking about. I believe that dialogue has indeed showcased as many voices as possible, capturing diverse perspectives. I challenge our co-conveners, Academia 2063, that we maintain the momentum by ensuring that the time between now and the summit, and even beyond, will see us working closer together. To note for this audience here, since 2010, FANAPAN has a mandate to work Africa-wide. West, Central, and North Africa are geography of interest. And I can guarantee to you that efforts are already underway to make sure that we interface with stakeholders that in that part of the world. This dialogue today, being the second in series, aimed at forging a common position on an important agenda of our time. I can safely conclude that we are all here because of the importance of the subject of food systems for our continent. As the global summit draws nearer, we need serious introspection as a continent, asking ourselves these two questions. The first one being, what interventions are needed to transform our food system? The second question being, what solutions will be there or are emerging from these engagements that then will inform our future programming or interventions? I believe today we have done well in terms of answering these two questions. The discussions have been captured, and I can guarantee to you that a formal report will be submitted to the summit team so that our deliberations fit into the resolutions of the summit. In conclusion, I would like to celebrate the power of partnership. The convergence of like-minded organizations in convening a common platform like this one, they don't come by very easily. The critical agenda of attending to an African food system, I think, is long overdue. It is a definite first step towards bringing the continent stakeholders to sing from the same hymn book. If we sing from different pages of the hymn book, it means that we will not be communicating well in terms of the challenges affecting our continent. Lastly, as FANAPAN, we are honored to have joined forces with Academia 2063 to convene this valuable dialogue. This, I believe, is just the beginning of a long journey which we'll be traveling together. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I thank you so much for your active participation. The session or the breakaway which I participated in, it was lively. I believe other sessions were equally fulfilling. So thank you so much for being part of our dialogue. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madzivandila, and a big thank you also to FANAPAN for organizing these dialogues with us together at Academia 2063. And your call for us all to sing from the same hymn book and continue to partner is well taken and will be heeded. And I'm going to pass the word now pass the floor to Alain Citraoré of ECOWAS to do our final closing and end today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame Colleen. I will speak in French so that our interpreter will also be comfortable somehow. Merci beaucoup. Encore une fois, merci à Academia et puis aux co-organisateurs de cette réunion. Ça a été un plaisir pour moi d'être le président et modérateur principal de cette session. Je vois qu'on a pu récolter énormément d'informations. Pour certains qui ne sont pas nouvelles, quand je regarde les mots d'introduction du docteur Yemi Dufara, on pouvait se contenter simplement même de ça et puis dire que bon, voilà la position de l'Afrique en général. Ce que je retiens ici, et je voudrais, avant de conclure, dire que je remercie également nos collègues de la CAC, de l'Union du Maghreb arabe et tous les autres participants des différentes institutions qui ont accepté vraiment de jouer le jeu et de participer à la dynamique. Je dois dire que pour la préparation de ce sommet mondial des Nations Unies sur les systèmes alimentaires, il y a énormément de concertations en cours, énormément. Il y en a qui ont été faites d'ailleurs même par le FARA, on a les conclusions. Il y en a qui ont été faites par la FAO, on a les conclusions. Et mieux que ça, les pays individuellement, en tout cas, tout ce qui concerne l'espace CEDEAO, ce que je sais, les pays individuellement font des concertations pour apporter le mieux qu'ils peuvent leur propre voix dans ce débat au niveau mondial. À ces rencontres où nous on a été, il y a deux choses que nous avons toujours dit. La résilience des systèmes alimentaires, ce n'est pas quelque chose qui est nouveau pour nous en Afrique. Et je pense que mes collègues de l'Afrique centrale et du Moyen-Orient partagent ce point de vue. Ce n'est pas du tout nouveau. La résilience des systèmes alimentaires, c'est quelque chose, c'est une dynamique sur laquelle nous travaillons depuis très longtemps. Et les éléments constitutifs de cette résilience-là, que ce soit les questions du changement climatique, donc de l'adaptation de l'agriculture au changement climatique, l'inclusion des jeunes et des femmes dans les chaînes de valeur agroalimentaires, n'est-ce pas? La recherche agronomique, les innovations de technologie, l'adaptation des systèmes d'élevage aux dynamiques de production et à la variabilité climatique, la formation professionnelle, les questions de nutrition. Tout ceci, c'est déjà inclus dans la plupart de nos politiques et de nos programmes. La grande question, c'est comment on va mettre ça en œuvre. Donc, ce que nous disons aujourd'hui à Academia, en résumé, il faut changer de paradigme. Et changer de paradigme, c'est intervenir, à mon sens, à 4 niveaux essentiels. Le premier, il faut vraiment fondamentalement à ce sommet s'entendre sur les mécanismes de financement de l'agriculture. Je suis convaincu et je suis sûr que les participants partagent ce point de vue avec moi. On ne peut pas financer des systèmes agricoles nulle part au monde avec des taux d'intérêt à 2 chiffres. Ce n'est pas possible. OK? Développer l'agriculture, monter une unité de transformation et produire de l'aliment, ce n'est pas la même chose que d'aller acheter des chaussures ou des vêtements à Dubaï ou en Chine pour venir les revendre en Afrique. Ce n'est pas du tout la même chose. Et apparemment, il n'y a que quelques individus qui le comprennent et apparemment, le leadership ne travaille pas là-dessus. Donc, je crois que ce message-là, il faut pouvoir le marteler au niveau de ce sommet. Le deuxième message qui est important ici, quand j'ai écouté les différents débats, le renforcement du capital humain est fondamental. Si vous regardez aujourd'hui l'envergure même de la formation académique, combien de jeunes hommes et filles vont dans le domaine des sciences de l'agroalimentaire? Très peu. Ils vont tous dans le domaine des finances, dans le domaine de l'informatique, parce qu'on leur dit que c'est là-bas qu'il y a de l'argent à faire. Et parce qu'il y a une perception de l'agriculture et des systèmes agroalimentaires comme le dernier refuge. Quand on n'a pas réussi à l'école, il faut aller là-bas. Alors que non, c'est du business, ça fait gagner de l'argent et ça enrichit des personnes. Donc, le capital humain dans le secteur de l'agroalimentaire est extrêmement important. L'exemple le plus palpable que j'ai souvent l'habitude de donner à nos collègues et aux États avec lesquels nous travaillons ici en Afrique de l'Ouest, si vous cherchez une école de boucherie-charcuterie, pour donner cet exemple, en Afrique de l'Ouest, vous ne le trouverez pas. Et la plupart des jeunes ouest-africains, surtout en milieu francophone, vont faire des écoles de BTS boucherie-charcuterie qui en France, qui en Belgique, qui je ne sais pas où. Quand ils finissent leur formation, ils sont réemployés par l'économie de ces pays développés parce que ces pays développés ont besoin des main-d'œuvre de cette nature. Donc, ils ne reviennent pas. Il faut développer le capital humain en Afrique. Et s'il y a des compétences dans le Moyen-Orient, que les pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, que les pays de l'Afrique francophone puissent partager et bâtir des mécanismes ensemble. Donc, ça, c'est le deuxième message. Le capital humain, pour nous, est fondamental. Le troisième message, c'est la formation des jeunes sur les métiers des techniques agricoles. On n'a pas besoin d'aller faire forcément des écoles d'ingénieurs. Vous regardez dans tout le pays, les formations sont élitistes. On fait master of science, ingénieur. Mais les formations de techniciens supérieurs, de BTS dans des métiers agricoles, où il y a de la valeur ajoutée, où on peut gagner sa vie, il n'y en a pas beaucoup. Et c'est ensemble qu'on peut le faire. À l'échelle d'un pays, ouvrir une école de boucherie-charcuterie, vous allez satisfaire les besoins de ce pays-là en 1 an. Fini. Mais quand vous vous mettez ensemble à l'échelle du continent ou à l'échelle des communautés économiques régionales, on peut faire participer plusieurs pays à un tel environnement et ça peut marcher. Et le troisième élément, avant le dernier, c'est vraiment de changer les mécanismes de gestion des projets et de financement des projets. Moi, j'ai fait une analyse des projets que nous avons en Afrique et dans notre espace. La plupart du temps, 70% des financements qui sont consacrés au développement repartent toujours vers ceux qui ont donné pour le développement. Il faut faire confiance aux entités africaines, aux organisations africaines. Il y a des associations professionnelles agricoles qui existent, il y a des associations de femmes qui existent, il y a des entités qui existent. Si on ne peut pas construire la résilience, si on ne peut pas investir sur ces institutions en Afrique, il n'est pas possible de changer de paradigme. Si on continue de faire le développement comme on le fait avant, il est clair et certain que dans 10 ans, on va revenir nous réinventer encore une nouvelle thématique qui va s'appeler résilience de je ne sais quoi. Et on va vouloir nous imposer ça, ou en tout cas, on va recommencer la route. Donc, il est important, finalement, en 4e point, de mettre en place des mécanismes durables en renforçant les outils et les mécanismes de financement ou les mécanismes institutionnels existants. C'est sur ce message que je voulais terminer, parce que rien ne serait pire que de sortir du sommet mondial sur l'agroalimentaire et de venir avec de nouveaux outils, des nouvelles institutions à créer, de nouvelles entités à mettre en place et recommencer le monde à nouveau. Il faut vraiment, je crois que ça, c'est le message et la voix commune que nous, Africains, nous devons porter et le marteler à ce sommet-là. Et nous avons besoin de l'aide du monde, mais que cette aide du monde bâtisse sur nos réalités, en nous aidant à renforcer nos structures. Et c'est de cette façon qu'on va réellement construire des systèmes de résilience alimentaire. Donc, je ne vais pas vous ennuyer davantage. Nous avons assez discuté. Merci à tous. Merci à Academia. Et bravo pour les différents panélistes qui nous ont édifiés par leur niveau d'expertise. Et j'espère que je fais confiance à Mme Collins et à Academia pour rassembler tout ça dans un document qui pourra aller à ce sommet mondial. Merci beaucoup et bonne soirée à tout le monde. Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Merci. Goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bonne journée, bonne soirée. Thank you. Merci, Monsieur Mohamed. Merci. Thank you.
But